All right, let's jump right into Joshua chapter 15 today. We're doing a deep dive into this chapter, focusing on the really detailed account of the land given to the tribe of Judah. Our goal is to sort of trace the map, look at key places, and maybe uncover some interesting stories within Judah's territory, all based on this text.
Yeah, this chapter is pretty remarkable for its precision. It's basically laying out the geography for Judah, one of the biggest, most important tribes. It lists their inheritance, the boundaries, the towns, and it even says it's clan by clan.
Clan by clan. So it's not just painting with a broad brush. It sounds almost like you said, a legal document from way back when. How big was this area we're talking about? Where does it even start?
Oh, it was a huge chunk of land, really significant. The text says Judah's portion went all the way down to Edom, touching the desert of Zin in the far south. So you can imagine it covers a lot of different kinds of terrain.
Okay, let's get into that geography then. Those boundaries must be complex. Where does the southern border kick off?
Right. The southern line starts at the bay, at the very bottom end of the Salt Sea, the Dead Sea, we'd call it. And from there, it's not a straight line at all. It heads south of Scorpion Pass.
Scorpion Pass. Wow, that sounds pretty rugged.
Definitely implies some tricky landscape. After the pass, it goes on to Zin. Then it passes south of Kadesh Barnea. Now, that's a name you'll probably recognize from the Exodus story.
Oh, absolutely. Kadesh Barnea. Lots of history there. So the border runs south of that point. Then where?
From Kadesh Barnea, it moves past Hezron, goes up to Adar, and then it kind of curves around to Karka. From Karka, it runs along to Asmon, and then it joins up with the Wadi of Egypt.
The Wadi of Egypt. That's like a big seasonal riverbed, right? Often used as a border.
Exactly. And that wadi takes the boundary line right out to the Great Sea, the Mediterranean.
Wow. Okay, so that southern edge crosses salt flats, mountains, desert areas near Kadesh Barnea, and follows a riverbed to the coast. That's quite a stretch. What about the eastern side? Is that simpler?
Much simpler, yeah. The eastern boundary is just the Salt Sea itself, the Dead Sea. It runs along the shoreline north, all the way up to where the Jordan River flows into it.
Got it. Straightforward. Now, the northern boundary. I have a feeling this one's going to be more complicated. Where does that line begin?
It starts right where the eastern one ends that bay where the Jordan meets the Salt Sea. From there, it goes up towards Beth Hogla, then passes north of Beth Araba. And then we hit this really specific marker, the stone of Bohan, son of Reuben.
Wait, Bohan, son of Reuben. That's interesting. A landmark named after someone from a different tribe, right in Judah's territory?
It is interesting, isn't it? Suggests these lines were well known and maybe agreed upon across tribes. Anyway, after Bohan's stone, the line goes up to Debir, coming from the Valley of Acre.
The Valley of Acre, another place with some heavy history from earlier in Joshua.
That's the one. Then the line turns north towards Gilgal. And the text is specific here. It faces the pass of Adumim, which is south of the gorge there. Then it keeps going to the waters of En Shemesh, and finally pops out at En Rogel.
En Rogel.
Hmm.
That rings a bell from later stories, usually connected with a certain city. Are we getting close to Jerusalem here?
Very close. You nailed it. From En Rogel, the boundary runs right up the valley of Ben Hinnom, and it follows the southern slope of, well, the text calls it the Jebusite city. That is, Jerusalem.
So Judah's northern line runs just south of Jerusalem itself. That's huge, thinking about future events.
Absolutely crucial positioning. So it skirts Jerusalem, and then it heads west.
Right. So where does it go after passing Jerusalem?
Okay, from near Jerusalem, it climbs up the hill west of the Hinnom Valley, right at the north end of the Valley of Rephaim. From that hilltop, the line heads over towards the spring of Nephtoah. Then it comes out near the towns of Mount Ephron and goes down towards Bala, which the text tells us is another name for Kiriath Jearim.
Kiriath Jearim. Another significant place, especially thinking about the Ark of the Covenant later on.
Exactly, a key location. From Bala, or Kiriath Jearim, the line curves west to Mount Seir, runs along the northern slope of Mount Jearim, that's also called Kisalon. Then it dips down to Beth Shemesh, crosses over towards Timnah, goes to the northern slope of Ekron, takes a turn toward Shikkeron, passes Mount Bala again, another Mount Bala, reaches Jabnele. And finally, just like the southern border, it ends at the sea, the Mediterranean.
Goodness, that northern boundary is just incredibly winding and detailed. So many landmarks and towns. It really gives you a feel for the effort involved in marking this out. And the last piece must be the western boundary then.
Correct. That one's easy again. It's simply the coastline of the Great Sea. So you've got this huge territory boxed in, Dead Sea and Jordan east, desert and the Wadi south, Mediterranean west, and that complex line north.
It really paints a vivid picture of Judah's inheritance. the scale, the different landscapes.
Yep.
But as you said, the chapter isn't just lines on a map. It talks about people actually taking this land. So, okay, let's unpack this part. Are there specific stories or individuals highlighted here?
Yes, definitely. There's a very important section focusing on Caleb, son of Jephunneh. It says Joshua gave him his own peace within Judah, and this was in accordance with the Lord's command. His portion was Kiriath Arba, which the text clarifies is Hebron, and it adds that Arba was the ancestor of Anak. Sets the scene, you know.
Caleb, right? One of the original spies who came back with a good report. So he gets Hebron, a major city. What's the first thing he does?
Well, the land wasn't exactly empty. His first task was dealing with the current residents. The text says Caleb drove out the 3 Anakites, Shishai, Ahiman, and Talmai from Hebron. These were descendants of Anak, known for being formidable.
So an act of conquest, claiming his inheritance.
Precisely. An act of faith, too, fulfilling the promise after all those years.
And he didn't just stop at Hebron, did he? He moves on to another city nearby, Debir.
That's right. After securing Hebron, Caleb marches on Debir, which, interestingly, used to be called Kiriath Sefer. That means something like City of the Book or City of Scribes.
Huh. Suggests maybe it was an administrative or learning center.
Could be. Anyway, Caleb wants to take this city too, and he issues a challenge.
Ah, yes. This is where it gets quite dramatic involving his daughter.
It does. Caleb announces, basically, whoever attacks and captures Kiriath Sefer gets to marry my daughter, Aksa. So it's a military goal tied to a very personal, very significant reward. Marriage and becoming part of Caleb's family and inheritance.
So who steps up? Who takes the city?
It was Othniel, son of Kenaz. The text identifies Kenaz as Caleb's younger brother, so Othniel is Caleb's nephew. Othniel successfully captures Kiriath Sefer, and Caleb follows through, giving him Aksa in marriage.
Now, here's where it gets really interesting, I think. The focus shifts to Aksa. She has something to say.
Yes, it's a fascinating little episode. Tells us a lot about her and about the practicalities of life then. It says when she came to Othniel, she urged him to ask her father for a field. Maybe she felt Othniel should ask, or maybe she was prompting him. But then when she approaches Caleb herself, she gets off her donkey a sign of respect, maybe petition. Caleb sees this and asks her straight up, "What can I do for you?" Or, "What do you want?"
And she's quite direct in her request, isn't she?
Absolutely. She says, "Do me a special favor, or give me a blessing. Since you've given me land down in the Negev, and you have to remember the Negev is dry, arid land, give me also springs of water."
Smart move. Land is one thing, but water sources are crucial, especially there.
Exactly. She knew what made land truly valuable and productive. It wasn't just about territory. It was about the resources needed to live on it. Very practical.
So how did Caleb respond to his daughter's boldness?
He granted it. The text simply says, so Caleb gave her the upper and lower springs. He recognized the wisdom of her request and gave her these vital water sources. It's a great little story about, well, female agency and resourcefulness tucked into this larger narrative.
It really is. It adds such a human touch to all the boundary lines and lists of towns. Speaking of lists, the chapter then shifts back to that, right? Cataloging all the towns within Judah's inheritance.
It does, yeah. It goes back into that detailed inventory mode, systematically listing the towns, grouped by geographical region, and it repeats, this is the inheritance of the tribe of Judah, clan by clan. Reinforces the point.
Okay, rather than us reading out potentially dozens and dozens of ancient town names, maybe give us the overview. What kinds of regions and towns are we talking about? What does this big list tell us overall?
Good plan. Yeah, just reading the names gets a bit dry. But the groupings tell us a lot. First, you've got the towns way down south in the Negev, near the border with Edom. This includes places you might recognize like Beersheba, huge connection to Abraham and Isaac and Ziklag, where David spent time later. About 29 towns listed there. It shows Judah's claim reached deep into that harsh southern desert.
Okay, so the desert south. What's next?
Then it moves to the western foothills, the area called the Shephelah. This is that transitional zone, kind of rolling hills between the coast and the main mountains, often very fertile, good farmland, but also really strategic and often fought over, especially with the Philistines nearby on the coastal plain. The towns here are listed in groups 14, then 16, then 9. Places like Lachish, a major fortress city, and Keilah are in this section.
And doesn't it mention some Philistine cities too?
It does, explicitly. It says this area included Ekron, Ashdod, and Gaza, with their surrounding villages and settlements stretching down to the Wadi of Egypt and the coast.
That's fascinating. It's listing cities that historically were major Philistine strongholds as part of Judah's inheritance.
Exactly. It probably reflects the intended scope, the claim based on the promise, even if they didn't fully control those specific cities at this exact moment. It shows the ambition right to the sea.
Okay, so desert, foothills.
Hmm.
What about the mountains?
Yeah. Next up is the Central Hill Country. This is Judah's heartland, really. Think defensible locations, maybe harder farming in places, but core territory. These lists are broken down to groups of 11, 9, 10, 6, and finally 2 towns. This is where you find Hebron and Debir, which we just talked about with Caleb. Also towns around Jerusalem, places like Ziph, Gedor, and those last 2 mentioned are Kiriath Baal, that's Kiriath Jearim again, and Rabbah. So it covers their main mountain towns and centers.
And is there a final region mentioned?
Just one more small list.
Yeah.
6 towns specifically noted as being in the desert. This probably means the wilderness area sloping down towards the Dead Sea. Places like Beth Araba, the city of salt, and Engedi, the famous oasis.
So putting it all together, the list confirmed that Judah's territory was incredibly diverse. Desert, foothills, mountains, wilderness, a huge and varied landscape.
That's the picture, yeah. Comprehensive.
Now, after all this detail, the boundaries drawn, the towns listed, the stories of taking possession like Caleb's does, the chapter end on a totally triumphant note? Or are there any hints of, well, unfinished business?
Ah, that's a crucial point. There's one very significant caveat, almost tucked away at the end of the Hill Country list. It states, very clearly, Judah could not dislodge the Jebusites who were living in Jerusalem. To this day, the Jebusites live there with the people of Judah.
Whoa, hold on. So after all that, they didn't take Jerusalem? The Jebusites were still there.
Still there, coexisting, apparently. It's a really stark statement standing against the flow of conquest and allocation.
That seems incredibly important, especially given Jerusalem's later role. Why include that detail?
It's profoundly significant. It shows the reality on the ground wasn't always a clean sweep. Here's this incredibly strategic city right on their northern border, perhaps even technically within it based on the line description, and Judah couldn't take full control. The phrase "to this day" suggests that when this part of Joshua was written or compiled, the Jebusites were still living there alongside the Judahites.
So it complicates that picture of straightforward conquest. It wasn't just draw the lines, move in, everyone else leaves.
Yeah.
Not at all. It points to a more complex reality of ongoing struggle, incomplete possession, or even cohabitation with existing populations in some key areas. Taking the land was clearly a process, not a single event.
Okay, let's step back a bit then. We've gone through the boundaries, the stories, the lists, this note about Jerusalem. What's the big takeaway for you, the listener, from this deep dive into Joshua 15? Why wade through all this ancient geography?
Well, I think this chapter gives us a really textured understanding of what establishing a nation or a tribe in this land actually involved. You see the meticulous planning, the importance of defined territory, that detailed geography wasn't just for show, it shaped identity and claims. You see the sheer variety of the land Judah inherited, desert, hills, potential farmland, hinting at the different ways of life and challenges within the one tribe. And then you get those personal stories like Caleb and Aksa, reminding us that inheritance wasn't just lines on a map, but involved individual faith, courage, and practical needs like water. And finally, that crucial note about Jerusalem, it grounds the entire narrative in a certain historical reality. It wasn't a perfect instant takeover. There were ongoing challenges, complexities, situations that weren't fully resolved. It's this mix of the grand plan and the messy reality.
That's a great summary. It really does bring the map to life, showing the ideals, the efforts, and the stubborn realities on the ground. We've traced those intricate borders, relived Caleb's conquest and Aksa's request, surveyed the regions Judah occupied, and hit on that key point about the Jebusites in Jerusalem. A fascinating foundation.
It really is. And that point about Jerusalem, it does make you think, doesn't it? If Judah couldn't initially take this key city, what does that suggest about the nature of the challenges they face? Maybe even about the limits of their strength at that time, or perhaps turn it around. What might that unresolved situation tell us about how God's promises sometimes unfold through a longer, more complex process than we might expect? It's definitely something the text leaves hanging there for you to ponder.